Christmas time always carries with it an air of tradition, be it through wonderful memories that we share with our family, the specials that celebrate the season that we grew up with, or just wanting to carry on the spirit that's been around for centuries. There's always been that one Christmas tradition that will always be done about this time of year. And one thing that I've done for my own personal tradition is watching a movie who many have argued whether or not it's a Christmas movie in the first place. And I'm here to answer that yes, it is. Don't let the action, blood, and heavy heaping of swearing deceive you as we talk about Die Hard, the original action Christmas movie. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, I am your ever-friendly Pokeprof, and welcome back to Fascinating Fiction. Yes, I know it's after Christmas. It's still the season as far as I'm concerned until New Year's. And yes, I am firmly in the category of those who consider Die Hard to be a Christmas movie. But if you don't, I'm hoping to make a believer out of you with today's episode. Because there's a lot more to it with the themes of Christmas than you might actually remember. And for those of you who have not seen the original Die Hard, I wholly recommend it, and I hope us talking about it today inspires you to check it out. Created back in 1988 by 20th Century Fox, which makes this yet another 30-plus-year-old film that I've talked about this year, Die Hard is the first real film that Bruce Willis actually became known for, the previous two before that being little-known comedies that really didn't give him much recognition. Before this breakout role of his, he was actually known more as a comedic actor from an ABC show called Moonlighting, a show that for some reason I feel like I should be more familiar with, and not exactly as an action star. In fact, it was this lack of confidence that originally made the advertisers of the film focus more on the actual setting of the movie than Willis himself as an actor. Makes it all the more interesting that he's gone on now to be as big of a star as he is, with over 100 movies under his belt. Now, here's the funny thing about Die Hard compared to a lot of old action films, especially made back during this era, and that is simply the fact that it's actually a pretty damn serious and down-to-earth film. Action movies, especially during the mid-80s, were kind of dominated by the untouchable heroes that could mow down legions of bad guys with the likes of Stallone and Schwarzenegger. Because of this, and being based off of a book called Nothing Lasts Forever, written by Roderick Thorpe, I hope I'm saying that right, it allowed them to give the movie a unique feel that made it stand out from the rest of the movies being made at the time. The film itself starts us off with being introduced to Willis's character, John McClane, as he's landing in California. A New York cop, he was invited there to see his wife Holly, whose career took off and had her move, with McClane not wanting to follow because he thought the job wouldn't go anywhere, as well as having his own work to deal with. It's kind of resulted in the marriage between the two characters being strained. What's really cool here is that, again, unlike the movies that we saw back in this era, Die Hard isn't afraid to let itself breathe when it comes to the action and how things are built up. Instead of the constant haggling action that you would see in a lot of films, there are slow moments spread throughout this movie. Of course, we can't get too much further into the film without acknowledging one of its best aspects, that being the role of our villain, Hans Gruber, played by the late Alan Rickman. That name alone is probably going to catch some attention from those younger in the audience, considering how well known he is for being Snape in the Harry Potter franchise. Unlike the Potions Master though, Gruber here is an out-and-out villain with the goal of stealing the millions of dollars that the company Holly works at has in their vault. This is where the main challenge of the movie comes from, as McClane has to go through and try to help everyone as best he can, while not only dealing with the challenge of the thieves, who are portraying themselves as terrorists to cause certain reactions from the police and FBI, but also having to deal with just how unhelpful those on the outside can be. Because, believe it or not, that's the other major point of the film. From the very start, we see McClane try his best to get word to the outside world that the Nakatomi building is in danger thanks to Gruber and the rest of his men, and no matter what he does, it just never seems to go right. Between the villains of the movie stopping the fire alarm, none of the police taking anything McClane says seriously, and even when the police do move into action, no one listens to what is actually happening in the building because they think they know better. It shows how little the people actually care outside of getting on with their normal lives. All except for one person, Al Powell. A cop played by Reginald VelJohnson, Al here is the only one that we really see that is not only willing to listen to McClane, but is trying to offer as much help as possible by bonding with him, all while never actually meeting McClane until the end of the film. They become each other's confidants, Al telling his bosses, the FBI, and anyone else who will listen just how much John is risking his life to take down as many of the thieves as possible, while McClane sympathizes with Al's history, as he accidentally shot a kid earlier on in his career, making it impossible for him to work as a cop on the streets afterwards thanks to guilt. It's this humanity on both of their parts that makes them such a draw to the film. You don't get to see characters like this bond just sitting around talking when there are guns to shoot and explosions to blow up. Add in the fact that Al here is a cop who clearly hasn't seen work on the streets in a while, and McClane is shown visibly suffering through the fights he's going through by bleeding, gasping, and overall getting by the skin of his teeth, and you end up with characters who are compelling despite the action trappings. What's more is Rickman's character also gets into the act as well. While he's still an out-and-out villain, because of how the entire movie is structured, we actually get something that we normally don't see in action movies. Our main hero and villain actually associating with each other. To be able to talk to the outside world as well as Al, McClane at one point gains a radio from one of the villains he's taken out. And while I'm not so sure that this is actually how those kind of radios work, his call for help is heard by Gruber, who is also able to talk to our hero, often taunting him along the way. This is something that's actually still rare to see in a lot of movies, the hero and the villain actually interacting with each other constantly as the plot moves forward. Normally you just see the villain hide in the shadows, not really coming to fight our heroes until the end of the movie, or they were pretending to be an ally the entire time before revealing who they were. Gruber, on the other hand, is able to constantly talk to McClane, and through that we get interesting character interaction, such as Gruber calling our main lead a cowboy. We get to see just how willing McClane is to fight for what's right, while also seeing what lengths Gruber will go to for the money, sacrificing his entire crew and not abandoning things when McClane starts picking them off. Not to mention that some of the best lines have been said between these two characters that have gone on to become quoted for years to come. And in this particular instance, I didn't censor it because of its iconic status, so folks, cover the little kids' ears here.
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
This also leads to one of the best interactions in the entire film, as throughout all of this, our main characters have only heard each other's voices and never seen each other. So when Gruber himself decides to check out how much of his plan is falling apart and runs into McClane, it gives us the rare opportunity for the villain and hero to interact as Gruber pushes forward an American accent. What's more is how this plays into the Hitchcock style of suspense. For those of you who don't know, there's a famous quote by Hitchcock about how suspense works. If you were to show people just talking to each other and a bomb blows up, you get surprise, which is a quick and dirty way of giving your audience emotions. If you show the bomb and when exactly it's going to blow, you create suspense for the audience for possibly entire sections of the film, filling them with worry and dread about if the characters are going to make it out of the scene alive. This scene here is just like that, where the audience knows that Gruber is our villain, but McClane doesn't. We feel that build of suspense and anticipation as we wait and see just who's gonna come out on top. And while the scene itself isn't all that long, it's still something that for an action-based romp that was the late 80s and early 90s, just wasn't normally done. It makes it stand out. Now at this point, some of you are probably just saying, alright prof, we get it, Die Hard is a good movie, but what makes it a Christmas movie outside of taking place during Christmas Eve? While when it takes place is a good chunk of its Christmas appeal, there are two other major reasons I consider Die Hard to be a Christmas movie. The first reason is actually because of the musical score you hear throughout the film. And I'm not talking just about them having Christmas songs, though they are in the movie too. I'm talking about the actual music you hear during fights and tense moments. You hear things like jingle bells actually being used for music at certain points of the film, with others actually having their notes being a clear nod to popular music. And if you don't believe me, here's an actual clip of it, non-edited.
I read you, pal. You the guy in the car?
Now that I've pointed it out, you will always notice it when you watch this movie again in the future. Haha. But if the choice of music isn't enough to convince you that it's a Christmas movie, then how about the theme of family and love that's shown? Throughout the entire second half of the film, Al and MacLeod become close friends with each other, talking about their history, their experience, and even supporting each other as the events of the film take their toll. There's a chemistry between the two men, a bond of friendship that goes against all the examples of jerks and people who forgo the spirit of the season that we get to see, and you can tell that this is a friendship that would last a long time. Or for about as long as they could get the actor back for future movies, whatever comes first. In the end, I think the reason that I categorize this film as a Christmas movie doesn't really matter when it comes down to it. It's just an overall enjoyable film that feels a lot smarter than your normal action movie. There's never a moment that feels like the main characters we're following are stupid or greedy, and those that are either shown just how stupid they are, or how their greed will come back to bite them in the butt. And even then, there's a feel that every single character, be they MacLeod or Gruber, could be a real person. It's a down-to-earth quality in the movie that meshes incredibly well with the wonderful action and suspense to get your blood pumping that you just don't get a lot of, and it makes it one of my favorite movies to watch during this time of year. So here we are, we finally reached the end of another year. Fascinating Fiction and the YouTube channel have grown quite a bit since we first started, and while I still wasn't able to get out the regular video updates that I wanted to this year, I feel that we had some really good episodes talking about some of my favorite things, while also highlighting some really wonderful stuff out there. This next year, as we move closer to our second anniversary, we're going to be doing our best here to not only ensure that we get a video out every 2 weeks, but we're also going to be revisiting some of the franchises we've talked about before, while also covering some new stuff. So while we'll be talking about things like James Bond, Sonic the Hedgehog, and other things that I've seen for the first time, we're also going to be talking about things we've seen already, such as Transformers, Avatar: The Last Airbender, and of course, more Disney. But you know what? It's been long enough. I think it's finally time. For the first episode of the new year, we're going to finally look at Tenchi Muyo: War on Geminar. With all that said, I hope I've done a good job to entertain you, and I'll do my best to do again so in the future. Hopefully you'll follow along with my content by subscribing and doing all the other things that gives us YouTubers life. If you wish to support me a bit more, I do have a Patreon where you can get access to bonus content. But until next time, stay frosty.